Good morning. Happy hump day. Welcome to Live with Liz. Thanks for joining me on our little coffee break style chats. We're talking about legal marketing, we're talking about business development, and today we're talking about law firm rankings. And it's a topic I've visited before, but it's been a minute. So I think it's worth, maybe a couple of sessions actually to really nail down what is happening with rankings these days. Um, well, a little bit changes, a little bit stays the same, but we are definitely seeing some investments in places that we haven't seen before and some action that we haven't seen before by certain publishers. And I think it's worth having, a little chat about this. So, the attrition rate on researchers is still very high. I don't know exactly what it is. This is completely unscientific. But what I have noticed is that there has been a lot of movement of personnel from publisher to publisher, or just departing the rankings research altogether. So you may notice, if not in this cycle, you may notice that you have new researchers. You may notice new people responsible for your practice areas or for your jurisdiction. And this is important. Why is this so important? Because often the researchers who are coming in don't necessarily know a lot about the actual practical work that is done in your jurisdiction or in the practice areas that they're researching. And this affects the way that you should be completing submissions and research that you're sharing with the publishers to have your law firm ranked. And I think it's super important. We're seeing this return to normalcy, and maybe you've seen things stay pretty much the same over the pandemic as people haven't been willing to make too much of a shift from what we were pre-pandemic, but we're seeing a lot of movement and investment now. So that to me says, okay, here's a sign. Things are getting serious. If you haven't updated your information for a while, now is the time to do it. And since you're updating your information, your cases, and your referees already, you absolutely should consider that your researchers may not be so familiar with what you're presenting. And that should be reflected in the way you communicate what you do. So if I pick it up and I'm a journalism student and I need to understand intellectual property, how do you explain it to me, your case, so that it makes sense to me and demonstrates that it's valuable and says, okay, we should consider where this firm is in the rankings, especially if you're looking for movement, if you're looking to go up in the rankings, if you're looking to preserve your place in the rankings as competition heats up. So that's one thing that everyone should be keeping in mind when we're doing the submission research this cycle. Now, I don't know, people may not understand the cycles and the research, but in the fall, at least in the northern hemisphere, we're starting fall tomorrow with 100-degree weather in Houston. Yay. And hey, good morning, Leah. So we have this season, it feels like, of rankings where the deadlines start coming, and certain research is conducted around the world at the same time, and certain research is separated by jurisdiction in the world, balancing it out for the people who are conducting the research. But we have a lot of deadlines in September, October, November, December, and then things start again. We have a spring cycle and then a little bit of a lull over the summer here in the northern hemisphere. So there's another thing cropping up in rankings that I think is interesting, and I received a ton of questions about this, and it's ranking aggregators. So there are more of these cropping up. There was one in particular that was started by someone who was at Chambers and Partners, who went off with someone who had previously been at Euromoney. They got together and created an aggregator of the rankings. So they're putting together, from the most valuable rankings in their perspective, the results so that we can see across the board where firms are ranked. But they're not the only ones doing this. And because there are more players in this field, it's starting to get even more confusing. So we have rankings on rankings. Do we really need that in the marketplace? I'm not sure, but they're doing SEO, and that's really the reason that we're participating in this game anyway, right? We want to be visible. We want the people who we need to find us in the right minute, and being a part of this ranking publication whole thing helps us do that. Another thing that we're seeing with the rankings that's not necessarily new, but we do see changes in it, and the emphasis of it is the focus on diversity. Now, This started, I want to say about 5 years ago, we started to see questions slipped into the research about the diversity in law firms. Now, those questions have turned into entire sections. And what we're seeing is this really correlates with what's happening in the marketplace because we see corporations prioritizing diverse firms. And we see this through the RFP process where corporations are asking the makeup of the people who are going to be working on their matters. They want to understand the priority of diversity in a law firm. They want to see that the makeup matches society, matches with their priorities, fits with their culture. And so this is something that has really come through. And we saw this with Chambers and Partners had a huge emphasis on this. And when they did their launch, they actually shared a lot of information about diversity and also insinuated that this is becoming more of a focus when it comes to law firm rankings. And we're also seeing this with new publications that keep cropping up that focus, if not on diversity as a whole, on one segment of the marketplace. So there are some problems with that, but that's a story for another day. It's just something to keep in mind as you're considering what your position is in the rankings and where you want to take it. Then another thing that we're seeing is analytics and analytics platforms. And this is something else that the publishers who are producing these rankings and conducting this research are basically selling to the firms, this access to the data that you're giving them. They are taking it, they're collating it, they're putting it into a platform that makes it incredibly insightful and usable in ways that we've never used this data before, especially on the law firm side. But one of the most interesting advancements in that area has got to be from Chambers and Partners again. And I've been skeptical about the value of certain publications. If you know me at all, you probably know that I question the value of these directories, from beginning to end, whether or not you're actually going to get clientele from them. But in the end, we do see that SEO is probably the main reason that people are participating now, that visibility. And the LMA put out or published a report that included something around 31% of decision makers are turning to these places to get information on outside counsel or potential outside counsel. So we do prioritize this, but these analytics are taking things to another level. And I'm not just seeing this with Chambers and Partners. We're seeing new analytics platforms from other publishers as well, from Law Business Research and Lexology. They are the ones that conduct IAM Patent 1000 and WTR 1000. They have analytics databases that are tied to Lexology that provide robust information to law firms. But Chambers and Partners has taken this a step further than expected. They have a new profile platform that's coming out. If you haven't invested in a profile or seen the new platform, it's worth a demo to see where this is going. But one of the things that is so interesting that they're doing is they're informing you about your referees and whether or not your referees have participated in the research. What? So they're going to tell you if the people who you are giving to them as references for your work have actually responded to their inquiries or not. That gives you the chance to connect with them and to ensure that they're happy with your work and that you should still be including them in that referee list. And that's certainly something to consider as you put those references together to share with the publishers across the board. And having access to information like that is surprising. I'm not sure how valuable this will be from the perspective of a law firm trying to get in touch with its clients. Of course, we want to be respectful of the time for the people who we're using as references, whether they be our direct corporate clients or they are colleagues or partners at law firms who are indirect clients. All of those are important. I don't know if it's going to change the way we do business, but it might. This seems pretty groundbreaking. And it's something that says to me, maybe we should reconsider what we're doing with Chambers and Partners and take a look at this platform and see if there's a shift that we need to be making based on this information. And then I thought, again, I keep getting asked this question still. How do I get ranked? And I mean, this age-old question, lawyers are wondering, how do we get included? Law firms are wondering how we get included. Sometimes they're defeatist about it and think, well, there are big players in this space that have a lot of market have a lot of the market cornered, and we don't have space to get into that top level, so we'll never get ranked. But by and large, that's not how all rankings work. You can still get ranked, and maybe you're not going to get into that top band or the second band overnight, but you know, there are ways to make this happen. And the most important things when it comes to trying to get ranked, you have to make sure that you have your quality of service in place first. And so the quality of your work, even if you only have a little bit, makes a huge difference. We're looking at the success, we're looking at metrics. If we want to look at a patent practice, for example, we want to say, what's your grant rate, or how successful are you? And maybe it's, different when you're comparing a firm that does, 10 patent applications to a firm that does, 200. It is different, but that doesn't mean that a small practice can't get ranked and can't be included. It can. And you can demonstrate this and participate in the process by sharing that information with the researchers and going ahead and submitting. Even if you don't feel like you have everything in order, you should go ahead and do it, because it does take a few cycles to get included in those rankings. And it may take 2 years, it may take 3 years, it may take 4 years, but as long as you're visible to them and they know that you exist, you have a better chance of being ranked than if you don't play the game at all. So if you have never submitted before and you're considering doing it, think first about the type of work that you're doing. It doesn't have to be this huge portfolio of work that competes with the top firms out there. You just have to show improvement and growth in your segment and in your area over time. So the quality of service is first, and that also speaks toward your references. You want to have some great references. You don't need to have 50 of them. 5 great references who will respond are as helpful as 50 who are more helpful than 50 who won't, much more helpful than 50 who won't. So think about that and don't be defeatist about it. You absolutely can get ranked even if you don't have a practice that is on par with the top players in your market or in your segment or in your legal practices. You absolutely can get there. And if you're unsure and need more guidance about what that looks like and about how to submit, we're happy to answer one-off questions from time to time that come up about what it is for you, because this may look different from person to person and practice to practice and service to service. It's not going to be the same across the board, but we can actually look and see, well, which rankings publications make the most sense for you. And no, you're probably not going to get into tier 1 or tier 2 in Chambers and Partners or the Legal 500. But, maybe if we direct your efforts when it comes to getting this kind of credibility to the publishers that are a little more niche, a little more focused on your area, and you start to gain visibility there, you set yourself up for growth and inclusion in rankings going forward. And you have us take into consideration all of these things that we mentioned about what's new in the industry and the changes that are taking place, the need to have clear communication for people who don't necessarily know your practice, the need to make the most of this data and these new analytics platforms that are out there to be able to make changes to the way that you're providing information and take a beat from what they're doing and what they're focusing on the research. They've put a lot of investment into what this looks like, especially in talking on the corporate side or the client side about these things. And that's where that emphasis comes from, like what we talked about on diversity. So if you need to take an internal check and say, well, and I've been saying this for years, if you don't have enough diversity in your practice, take a look and see what it takes to get there and to become more diverse. Don't just say, well, we don't need to be diverse, because you do. I mean, if you're just relying on the old school way of doing things, and I've been saying this for years, it's going to come to a head and you're going to start either losing market position, losing clients, or losing your rankings visibility. It's all going to start happening. Maybe before I expected it to happen faster, enter pandemic, things changed a little bit. I really think this is going to start happening now. So take a good look and make sure that you can respond to these inquiries in a way that's meaningful, that gets you in the position that you need to be. And that's what we've got for rankings, this season of rankings. If you've got any questions about submissions, shoot us an email, solutions@firmforward.com, and join us next week on Live with Liz. For all of those who celebrate, have a sweet and happy new year. Rosh Hashanah right around the corner. And yeah, see you next time on Live with Liz.